So apparently Mage Knight is basically a video game now, which I'm still not sure if is a good thing or a bad thing. Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and this is News and Week in Review. Game news, week in review, all of that stuff. The usual stuff. We'll have news, we'll have games, we'll have topic of the week, as well as what I played and all the videos of the week. Going over all of that, timestamps to everything down below, links to everything I talk about down below as well. Starting off with news, and this is likely going to be a shorter episode than normal. I say that sometimes I'm wrong, but just because I am filming this earlier than normal, I'll tell you why later. I'm filming this a little bit earlier than normal, and so less stuff has happened to me this week on all counts. But let's go ahead and dive into it. As far as news, I only really have two things to talk about. First of all, Mandy Pattinson. There's a little video of him learning to play Wingspan. If you're not familiar with him, he's known for both Homeland. He's known for what's the very dark crime show? Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, it's gonna bother me. A TV show, a crime thing that's very, 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 very dark and twisted and is awesome, but I'm blanking on the name. He's known for that too, apparently. I just can't remember what it is. And then also, he's very famously known for being in Tiggo Montoya, You Killed My Father, Prepare to Die. He doesn't look as young as he did, because that was actually a long time ago. But that's what we have there. He's basically, there's a video of him learning to play Wingspan and just like going crazy about how complicated it is. Very entertaining, very endearing. I've always liked him, just because of the shows he's been in and the stuff he's played, and he always seems very down to earth, and yeah, either way, that's just a small little thing there. And then the only other real news piece we have, it's only one of the news piece, but it is kind of a bombshell, because apparently, no pun included, doesn't even like board games.
The truth is that I don't love board games.
I mean, that's an absolute bombshell. I mean, that's like, you have someone who's such a respected reviewer in this space, and he doesn't even like the stuff he's reviewing. That is, wait a second, I missed the whole other part of it.
Here's a tasty soundbite that I'm sure is not gonna get clipped out of context. The truth is that I don't love board games. Love is a strong word. I really, really, really like playing board games. Some of the best times in my life have been spent playing board games with friends. They're an indelible part of me, but I like other things too.
And there we go. That makes a bit more sense. But in all seriousness, this is part of a video that Efka put out about, you know, being in the content creation space for 8 years and his journey through it. I've been watching No Pun Included for, I want to say, 5 years or so. It makes sense. Roughly 5 years, I want to say, I've been watching them. Their stuff is tremendous, fantastic. The same humor that Shut Up and Sit Down brings to the table, but with a different feel and twist all their own. I've enjoyed watching their content for a long time and seeing it iterate and grow. The video is a fascinating video to watch. I'll link to it down below. I think it's especially fascinating if you've been following their content for a long time, because it's interesting to see how critical he is of some of his earlier stuff that I personally thought was fantastic when I watched it. And it's interesting to see his evolution of going from just, this is evolution of being a content creator. I think he's stricter on himself than most of his fans are probably strict on him, which honestly makes sense, because he's also stricter on some games, more strict on some games than I think is fair, so it's good that he holds himself to the same standard. But, I mean, in all seriousness, I've said a long time ago, one of the earliest videos on the channel was 10 YouTubers that I watch in board games, like my favorite 10 YouTubers, and amongst them was No Pun Included. I've always enjoyed their content. I don't always agree with their opinion, but that's not something you need to actually enjoy someone's content. I've enjoyed their content, I've enjoyed what they bring to the space, and their shift into increasingly more introspective content, and not necessarily introspective, but like almost documentary style content of like, hey, we're not just reviewing a Eurogame, we're going to talk about the whole history of Eurogames. It's fascinating, it's well done stuff, their content is genuinely top notch. So jokes aside, it was a fun video to watch and go down that little bit of a rabbit hole of memory lane with him. From there we move on to game news, just, you know, board games and stuff, and starting with that Mage Knight thing I told you about. Paladin's Oath is apparently a video game on Steam that I haven't dived into yet, but I've watched the video they have on Steam and read the comments and reviews, and basically it seems like it's basically just Mage Knight. I mean, the designer says it's inspired by Mage Knight, but the review comments say it's not inspired by Mage Knight, it's basically Mage Knight as a video game. So you may already have played Mage Knight as a scripted TTS mod, which is one thing, or you might, like myself, might just be playing it in person, but this is apparently a video game version of Mage Knight that I absolutely plan on getting my hands on. The interesting thing is, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, like I said at the beginning, because Mage Knight is a game I struggle to get to the table, but I always enjoy the tactile experience more than the video game experience. I will sit there and set up games that I feel should be video games because I enjoy sitting down at a table and playing those games. And so I'm not sure whether to look forward to this or be terrified by it. Probably a bit of both, we'll see. It may end up being the reason I get rid of Mage Knight, because Mage Knight, for all that I love it, I don't pull it out that often. Sometimes some games can be better as a video game. So we'll see. But that's going to be Paladin's Oath. I'll link to that down below in case you're interested in that. We have Skymines, or Skymines, I think. Skymines from the designer whose name I'm blanking on right now. He did Great Western Trail. He did, oh my gosh, I'm completely blanking on his name. It's a re-implementation of Mombasa from... I have his game somewhere. I'm having a terrible day with names. The designer of Great Western Trail, the designer of Mombasa, the designer of a bunch of other games, Alexander Pfister. There we go. Alexander Pfister. Apparently he's doing Skymines, which is a re-implementation of Mombasa. That took long enough to say because I forgot the relevant name of the designer. But yeah, the art looks cool. The game looks cool. I never really played Mombasa, so I would love to dive into it or have an excuse to dive into it. This seems, I'm guessing, I don't know for sure, but speaking of no pun included, this seems to be a leaning towards re-implementing a theme that was distasteful to some, and I have no problem with that. I mean, at the end of the day, whether or not something bothers me personally, the drift towards being mindful of what bothers others and re-implementing things around that, I don't have a problem with it, and the art looks great, and I do find colonial themes to be dry, not necessarily distasteful personally, but just dry and uninteresting, so this looks cool. We will inherently see the queue of people who are like, how dare, like, oh, we're letting... I don't want to get political. No one's taking away Mombasa. No one's taking away the thing that you like right now. Another option is being offered to those who want to experience that without the distaste attached. So just remember, before you heavily go down any rabbit hole, no one's taking away something that you like right now. I don't know why I drifted that way. Whatever, it's too late now. Moving on from that, we have Cosmic Odyssey. Cosmic Odyssey is the newest expansion for Cosmic Encounter, bringing us a campaign aspect to Cosmic Encounter, which could be intriguing, I guess. I don't know. I feel like Cosmic Encounter leans heavily into the one-shot journey. I don't know if a campaign aspect to it feels necessary, but Cosmic Encounter has at times been one of my favorite games in my collection. Right now, it's not in my collection anymore, but that's just a journey of it over time. We have Autobahn from Alley Cat Games. They're bringing another Eurogame to the table, coming to Kickstarter sometime soon, I imagine. But Autobahn, the art looks great, game looks intriguing, very, very curious, and we'll see what happens there. And then lastly, and I saved this for last, because last week I called this. Last week in my week in review, I was very specific, and I called this. We have On Tour, On Tour from Board Game Tables, coming out with an expansion, Paris and New York. Because last week, they had announced an expansion to Bytes, they had announced an expansion to QE, and I was like, QE. And I was like, there's no way they're not having a third expansion and doing some sort of a, Kickstarter trio or whatnot. And I guess that On Tour would be the one that was selected. So, yeah, I'm just going to say that this is not as exciting as the time I was right about Marvel Zombicide, but it's still exciting for me. I like guessing correctly. It's strangely fun. But anyways, that is that, which brings us to the topic of the week. Topic of the week this time is kind of just I guess me. The topic of the week is me right now. The nature of the fact, it sounds very bad when I say it that way. If you missed it, I quit my job recently. I quit my job, I guess by the time you're watching this last week or a week ago, whatever it was. I put up a video on the channel this past Sunday titled I Quit. Going into that, I'm now making the way towards being full-time content creation, which is something that I planned on doing either way, but I thought it would be like a 2 to 5 year journey, and things got accelerated. So we'll talk about that, or we did talk about that, and we'll talk about it more in other videos. I'm not heavily going to talk about it here because I don't want to rehash the same conversation 14 times. There is last week's video on Sunday. You can check that out. There'll be a full video on monetization on the channel, as well as general extra notes or whatnot if you want to check that out. I also, if you are a Patreon, I've talked about it twice now over on Patreon, a few times, kind of backstory, like there's some stuff from like a few months ago where I briefly touched upon some drama stuff at work. Point is, I don't want to overly rehash too many things. But just from a stance of what's next for me, what my next 2 weeks is looking like. Because my next 2 weeks is going to have a bunch of stuff, which is my last day of work was your yesterday, I guess. For me, it's still, I have a few more days, but your yesterday was my last day of work, or 2 days ago, I guess. Thursday was my last day of work, for context. And so I'm officially jobless as of the time that you're watching this, but I'm also heading straight into Passover. By the time you're watching this, it is currently Passover for me. Passover is Saturday and Sunday for me, and then it's going to be a few days of intermediate Passover, which is a longer explanation about how the Passover holiday works. But the way the Passover holiday works, in case you don't know, is that it's a Jewish holiday, for those who don't know, and it is 2 days at the front and 2 days at the end, and then a kind of intermediate halfway point of like a few days of semi-holiday, where we can be online, we can do various things, but we're supposed to be light on work. It's a longer conversation as to how that works, but it's basically 2 strong holidays on both ends, and then a little bit of middle holiday in the middle. That's the shorter explanation of it, without getting too technical. But to that end, Saturday and Sunday are the first 2 days, and then from there is going to be the intermediate holiday, and then followed by, again, 2 more days of strong holiday, which means by the time I actually really shift into, hey, my life has changed permanently, it's going to be the end of April. Basically, roughly 2 weeks from now. So, or a week and a half from when you're seeing this. And so that's when things kind of start drifting into me finding a new schedule, finding a new rhythm, finding out how to make things adjust, because I've been on a schedule for so long that I don't know how things are going to change or adjust. I know there are many things I have been pushing off. There's a degree of rubber banding back into place, of having the rubber band snap back in on itself, that will happen. At the end of the day, for the past 2 years, I have been pushing myself tremendously to manage all the things. Meaning, I had a life, and then I started doing 11 videos a week while keeping the rest of the other aspects and facets of my life intact. That has a cost. That cost has come in the form of sleep. It's come in the cost of I stopped reading books for like 2 years. Like I read a book the first time for about a month and a half ago. I read a book for the first time in 2.5 years, basically. Like I stopped reading books. I just didn't have time for it. You have to make trade-offs when you just push all this YouTube content into a space that didn't exist. I sacrificed a lot of other aspects and changes to my life and just pushed myself to the edge, knowing that this was going to be a temporary thing, not knowing how long it was going to be a temporary thing. And so some of the 8 hours a day I got back are going to come back in the form of just letting my life flow into the crevices of just letting things happen again. And that will happen inherently. You can't push yourself as hard as I have been for the past 2 years forever without a consequence, without a price to be paid. And so that's going to be part of it. But even once I'm done with that, I imagine there'll still be 5 or 6 hours of extra time a day that I have to adjust to, and I have to figure out how to schedule my life so that it doesn't get completely wasted. I don't heavily do videos on time management. Maybe I'll do a full video on time management on the channel. Could be an interesting conversation, or it could be a completely dead one. We'll see. But a big part of time management is you want to schedule yourself. You want to try to push yourself to always be filling the various moments in time. And that includes fun, by the way. I schedule my fun. I'll have game night. I'll have movie night. I've had a dedicated date night with my wife every single week for the past 5 years now. And throughout this past 2 years, I didn't give that up because a dedicated date night with my wife was important to me. And you don't give up the things that are important to you. You give up all the other things. You have to always determine in your life what's important and prioritize your life accordingly. And it does help, to be fair, that my wife likes playing board games. It definitely does help. But we do other things together as well. We watch TV shows, we play board games, we used to do puzzles. We haven't done puzzles in a while. But we'll even sit together in bed and just read books. Like, we spend time together. We do find that time. But there'll be a degree of trying to figure out how my life adjusts. Because one thing that I don't plan on doing is I don't plan on doing 15, 16, 18 videos a week on the channel. I have several things I plan on doing. I plan on doing more live content that I hope to, by the time May starts, I hope to have live content on a more regular, consistent basis. Live content I couldn't do on the consistent basis that I wanted to because it was either Sunday and I had the kids, or it was during the week and I had a job. That was always the balance, and that's why live content has always been irregular, because I can't schedule something if I'm engaging with my children, and I can't schedule something if I'm at work. So in case you're wondering why live content was always so infrequent. But live content will happen more often. There's other things as well I plan on doing, but all of these things are going to be slowly over time. They're not going to be right away. I don't want to take on 15 new things. I want to take on things slowly, iteratively, and lock them in as habits before moving to the next one. If I just do everything at once, it'll start falling apart very quickly. I plan on adding a few things, locking them in as muscle memory, as habits, getting used to the content, and then on to the next thing again and again and again. Whether it's having lower thirds in my videos so you can see the game I'm talking about, whether it's adding more images when I do a list video, maybe even this week in review for the first time in who knows how long, maybe I make the extra effort and put the videos in, the pictures for all the games I talked about. It probably won't be done prettily, but maybe I'll just do it for the sake of having it done. Again, keep in mind that when I film this, I still have a job and all those things, but I want to start getting in the habit of doing things that I haven't had the time to do, and now I have the time, so I want to start improving the content. I want to add more B-roll. I want to add the third camera angle. We'll talk about that. That's going to be relevant in the monetization video that goes up this next week. But I want to start doing things. I want to start flowing into a bit more of a schedule, and to improve the quality of the content, to improve any number of different aspects or facets of what I've been doing here, while not necessarily having more, but hopefully having better. Maybe I'll have more live content than the same number of regular. It's going to be a process. It's going to be a process of exploration, of figuring it out. I don't have firm answers or knowledge as to what will happen. I just have the knowledge that I have more time, and the time is not meant to just sit there and play games. It is peripherally, because my job is now playing board games, but it's meant to invest into making the channel better. That's the point. At the end of the day, if I'm going to sit here and ask for Patreon support, if I'm going to sit here and do this, I mean, the goal was never to quit my job so I can just play video games all day. I have to phrase it as play video games all day, because the goal is to quit my job to play board games all day, because that is what this channel is going to be. But with context, maybe I start diving into campaign games more. There's a whole bunch of things I will be figuring out, and I will be going through that process. But the biggest thing I need to get down is a schedule. The wishy-washiness of I'll make things work doesn't actually make things work. That's not how life works. When you're going to just make things work, you end up staring at your phone, you end up doing that thing, you end up dawdling around the house doing this or that, you don't act with focus and intent, and you end up wasting a ton of time. There is a reason that I have been able to do all the stuff I've done over the past 2.5 years, and that is a large degree of focus. And it's not something I just learned one day. There's all these different classes and aspects of time management, of how to try to get as much as possible out of your time. There's a lot of things out there, and I've been fortunate enough across the course of my life that I've been exposed to many of these classes or lessons or concepts out there as far as how to fill your time. But a schedule is the most important thing, by far. You need to have a schedule. You need to have a list of things you're trying to get done. You can't just walk into a day. Again, you could if you're fine with it, but I'm not fine with it. You can't just walk into a day and say, whatever, I'll get stuff done. If you walk into a day with that approach, as opposed to the approach of, I will get these 15 things done, you get more done when you have the 15 things. It might not be all 15. Maybe you only get down 11 of them. But if you ambiently walk into the day, you'll only get done 6 of them. So there's all these different aspects, but my biggest fear is that I will have quit my job and I won't even have time. That's my biggest fear, that somehow those 8 hours will just disappear in a second because it just ambiently happens. And so for me, it's going to be a process. It's going to be a process to figure it out, to establish patterns, to establish behaviors, to lock those things down, because I want to make the most out of the opportunity that I have, the opportunity that I've been given, the opportunity that I'm incredibly grateful for, and I want to make it work. I don't want to take it for granted. I want to improve all of this. And if I'm given on the one hand, I want to return it in B-roll, in anything else, third camera angles, live streams, anything else that improves the quality of the channel. I want it to be a reciprocal relationship. So that's my next 2 weeks, trying to figure it out, trying to get things going. My hope, my goal is that by the beginning of May, you start seeing these changes. Small, slowly, it won't all be at once, but I want things to start slowly rolling out by the beginning of May. We'll see what happens. But whatever the case, thanks for being along for that ride. Which brings us to what I played, which is a very short list, comparatively speaking, because, again, this is being filmed, going back to what I said earlier, this is being filmed earlier than planned because of, well, Passover and wrapping up my job at work, and I'm trying to get this done. Usually I film these weekend reviews on either late Wednesday or early Thursday. That's usually when I get them done. This week is being filmed late Tuesday. It's Tuesday night for me, so it's very early for a weekend review, which means I'm missing half the stuff I usually would have, but we'll talk about it anyway. So, Jurassic World. I don't think actually, I mean, this is what I played, so I'm going into what I played, but I think I talked about Jurassic World already, because I'm 7 games in. I was 7 games in the last time we spoke. I don't think that's changed, so that's not a new play. We have Dead Reckoning. I dove into Dead Reckoning again. Got another play of that in from John D. Clare. Great game. Still a great game. We'll talk about it more. I want to dive into the sagas a bit more before I review it, so I don't feel the need to fully explore all the content, but I want to get a few games in with the sagas, and at that point I'll have a full review on the channel. Technically, I reviewed it a long time ago, but it was like it was not a great review, and it was based on one play a very long time ago, and it was whatever. You can check it out if you want. It's been a long time, and I think the quality of the content has gone up a bit since then. So from there we have Unseen Domains. Unseen Domains, oh my gosh. Okay, I got a few plays in of Unseen Domains, and it's not on the table here. It's fantastic. I shouldn't be telling you that. That's not true, because it's a review coming up. It's a good game. It's not fantastic. It's a very, very good game. I'll have a review of it at some point soon. I really enjoyed my time with Unseen Domains, and I worry that it'll be a Kickstarter that doesn't garner the attention I want. It's from the same people who did Asonia, and I think it'll do fine, but I don't think it'll get the buzz that I would like it to get, because I think it was a really enjoyable game. I have critiques, I have comments, I have all that stuff, but I really enjoyed my plays of Unseen Domains. We'll have more content at some point. I'll do a review and all that stuff. We'll talk about it more. We have Inish. Gotten 2 plays of Inish. A fantastic game that I always love diving into. I don't pull it out often enough, but whenever I do, like, there's some games that you pull out and you're like, it's a good game, but I don't need this game. And there's other games you pull out and you're like, there's a reason these are the top 20, top 30 games in my collection. Inish, for context, I think is number 3, if not mistaken. It's number 3 of all time this past year. Blood Rage dropped to number 4. It was Terraforming Mars, Castle of Burgundy, Inish, and then Blood Rage. I'm kind of okay with that order, although honestly I could see Inish going back up. Inish is just so good. It's a good game. Gotten a few plays of it. It's a good game. Then we have Age of Civilization. Age of Civilization is a game that I haven't talked about that much, but I have talked about it briefly. It's a good game. It's a really solid game that packs a good Civ game into a small box. I really enjoy it. I think it's worth paying attention to and worth picking up, especially given the price point. They recently had a Kickstarter for another small box game that I should probably get my hands on that, honestly, just given how much I liked Age of Civilization. We have Mountains Out of Molehills. I got into play of Mountains Out of Molehills. That's from the OP. I'll be diving into it more with my kids. It is a programming game of area control-ish. Not really area control so much as pile control, but it kind of ends up translating to a similar concept. Not exactly, though. But it's a fun game. I like it, with the caveat. We'll talk about it more. There'll be a full review. I think it's a very, very good game if your focus is gateway or family. If your focus is heavy gamers, there are much better games out there, but it's an enjoyable game to play. We'll talk about it more at some point. There'll be a review, probably with one of my kids. But yeah, Mountains Out of Molehills from the OP, from the op. We have Anastyr. Anastyr, is that all I played this week? Is that all I played? It's been a busy week. I'm prepping for Passover. I'm trying to get like all the... Because again, I'm going to be offline and out of town this week, which means I have to have a whole bunch of stuff ready and prepped and well in advance. So I've been filming a lot of stuff, a lot more than usual, but I guess that's all I have. We have... Unless I'm missing something. I feel like I might be missing something, but whatever. It is what it is. We have Anastyr. Got in several plays of Anastyr. I got in a half play with the designer, with someone from Mythic. And then I got another half play as I taught Deshi and Sierra, and then we got in a full play as we actually did a filmed gameplay of it. Basically, there's only one scenario, so 2 half plays and a full play is plenty, considering there's only one scenario to actually dive into. It's going to be called a First Impressions because of that, because we only got a single scenario on what is a campaign game. But my opinion of Anastyr is overall positive. You can check out the review. That will be coming up, well, next week, basically. Next week, you'll see the review for it. Anastyr is launching on Tuesday, I believe. You'll be able to see a gameplay over on Quacklope, a review over on my channel, First Impressions review, very, very, very strictly First Impressions. But overall, I was pleasantly surprised by it. My biggest problem with it is I just think Mythic Games now has too many games hitting a specific genre such that I have to get rid of some of them, because there's Super Fantasy Brawl, which I love. There's Monster Apocalypse, which I enjoyed and want to dive into more to see how extra monsters and all that stuff augment it. And then we have Anastyr, and all of them are kind of hitting a similar sense of strategy and, you know, fun gameplay in a mini beating up sense. Combine that with having Besiege, with having Massive Darkness coming soon, with having Zombicide. At a certain point, Cthulhu Death May Die. At a certain point, I'm going to have too many games that fall into the miniatures, rolling dice, beating people up genre. Fortunately, I quit my job and I can play these games more now, but still, it feels like it might be getting to be a bit too much. So, I really like Anastyr. Right now, the one that's actually in danger is Monster Apocalypse, because that was the one I was most on the fence about. Enjoyed it, but there's Enjoy It, and then there's Anastyr and Super Fantasy Brawl on the other sides, which makes the conversation more interesting. But we'll see. We shall see. We'll talk about it at some point or another when I finally have a chance to fully dive into those games. For right now, Anastyr and Monster Apocalypse are both games I want to continue diving into because I only got a very short, small taste of them. And that's what I played. Very, very, very light this week, comparatively speaking. I usually play a lot of stuff, and again, I'm sure I'm missing something because I play a lot of stuff, but it has been a busy week, to be fair. It's been a very busy week. Anyways, from there, moving on to the Week in Review. The Week in Review, starting off with what I played. No, we just did what I played. Starting off with Saturday. We had Magic Maze, a review from Magic Maze on Mars specifically, which is I like Magic Maze the original better. I like things that Magic Maze on Mars does better, but overall I think Magic Maze is the game I'd probably recommend. Ultimately, it's a 3.5 out of 5 for me. It's a fun puzzle cooperative game of not being able to communicate. Lots of pros, lots of hilarious moments, but I find it's not a game that's a keeper. It's a game I play through and then move on from. So it's a game I will be moving on from because I've played through it. From there, we have a review we had later on Saturday, we had a review for Jurassic Park World. Jurassic Park is a good game, solid game, good legacy experience. I will have more content on it when I'm done with it completely. I don't know exactly where or how, but there'll be some more content. But I didn't put a number in the first impressions-ish because I'm 7 games into a legacy game, and each game has gotten progressively better, which made it very tricky for me to review it because it is a moving target. But I also want to get coverage out in time for people to make a decision, which makes it inherently hard. But I would say I'm leaning towards it being a 4 to 5. As I played, it started off as, hey, this is clearly a 3 because of how simple it is, but it's obviously the first 2 games, so let's give it time. Then it drifted to being a 3.5 as we continued to play, and I thought it would cap out, but as it continued, it did move up to a 4. It's definitely being biased by being legacy, to be very clear. If this is a non-legacy experience, I think it would be settling at a 3.5. But the mystery of legacy, the uncovering, the sense of journey of exploration that legacy games give me, definitely boosting it up. As of right now, I'd give it a 4 to 5, but that rating is definitely subject to change as I continue to play through it. But like I said, the biggest thing for me is that I stopped playing it because I was like, I don't want to burn through the game and just burn myself out just to play all 12 games for you. And so I played 7 games, I gave you my opinions, where they were at, and we'll talk about it more. I think it's a good game. My biggest pet peeve is still the price point. The price point just seems really expensive for what it is, but it is a good, enjoyable experience. Then on Sunday we had the video called I Quit My Job. It was very direct, it was very to the point, it was very dramatic, or partially dramatic. The thing about clickbait is, clickbait works if your content backs it up, and I think I Quit My Job is definitely clickbaity. I mean, I put giant block letters called I quit, and I did that intentionally. I wanted as many views as possible on this as possible. It's a big news for me, and it's relevant to just everything. And so I definitely did try to lean heavily into getting people to watch it, but also because it actually is dramatic content. Dramatic is relative, but for me it's dramatic. My life has been completely changed. My plans that were 2 to 5 years out are ramped up ahead of time, so it's definitely a big deal for me. I appreciate tremendously the feedback and the comments and the kind words and the Patreon support and all the different things that I got. I mean, I tremendously appreciate all of it. The biggest thing is it's just incredible to know that there's a community of people out there that are that supportive. There's a community of people out there that are just that. I mean, it's nice. Something I said over on a Patreon video is that my wife has a friend who saw the video and saw the comments and was just like, wow, it's so cool that Alex has that many people out there who have his back, who have those things to say about him. And it's something that to a certain extent I take for granted because I've been living with you all for so long. But I think it was such an interesting moment to me because it was like the lens of an outsider looking in, someone who knows me separately, and it's just saw the community and was just thought it was very cool that I had that. And I know it's cool that I have that, but I don't always appreciate it as much as I should because it's become the norm for me. And so thank you for all of that. But that was Sunday's video. I quit my job. Monday was to back or not to back. Plain and simple, to the point, usual to back or not to back, no major takeaways. I think I'm backing nothing this week, which is nice because there are definitely things coming up that I will be backing, and so I backed nothing in to back or not to back, at least as of right now. We'll see what changes. Then on Tuesday was 3 videos. Tuesdays actually usually Tuesdays are a fairly uninteresting day because they're review videos and they're crammed together and they usually get less views, and it's part of the content. It's the nature of any one review usually gets less attention than something that's more generically relevant as opposed to a singularly titled review. This Tuesday though was fairly popular, all things considered, and that's partially because of, again, the titles, the clickbait, all that stuff. Or we'll explain. Let's go through one at a time. So first of all, on Tuesday we had a review for The Dark Quarter. Did as expected. The Dark Quarter is a game over on Kickstarter from Lucky Duck Games, from Van Ryder, and it's doing well. I mean, they're at 400,000 day one. Kudos to them. So the review did as expected. Good, not great, but good. Then from there we had Far Cry, What the Hell Happened? And that's a little bit of a clickbaity title, but again, I think it matches the content. I mean, the content is, we have Far Cry. Far Cry is an IP of a game that has sold millions and millions and millions of copies, and they had the 200 backers on their campaign day one. That is embarrassing. It's sad. It's genuinely sad, but it's also embarrassing. There's such a huge misjudgment of what the audience wanted from Far Cry and what happened there that I put out a video called, appropriately, Far Cry, What the Hell Happened, and going into it. And I think, again, it's a dramatic title and it pulls in people's attention, but it's true. It's just such a shocking thing to see an IP fail that badly, and I feel very bad for the people at Funforge. I feel very bad for the people who put time, effort, energy, and attention into this game. It has to like royally suck to see that pulled out from underneath you. And I know that many of you, myself included, are like, well, it's your own fault. You should have like done your market research, and you shouldn't have just thought the fans would want this. Who would ever think they want that? And I agree with that. I do. But even as I think that, there's also a degree of empathy, of sympathy, of sadness for the people who are on the other end of a bad judgment call. Sure, there's a bad judgment call. That's fine. It has to be so horrifically bad for them. So I'm sympathetic to them. Then lastly on Tuesday, the last thing was Sleeping Gods, which also did well as a video, primarily because it's Sleeping Gods and they have an upcoming Game Found campaign, but also it's Sleeping Gods, one of the hottest titles out there. My overall experience with Sleeping Gods was I forgot to talk about Dark Quarter. Dark Quarter is a game. For me, it would be a 3 out of 5. It's first impressions. I didn't rank it, but it would be a 3 out of 5 for me. There are elements I like in it a lot, the story particularly, but at the end of the day, the mechanics are very similar to me to Chronicles of Crime, which to me was a system that I liked without loving. Chronicles of Crime devolves to a lot of guesswork and point-and-clicking QR codes. That's my experience with it, not necessarily yours. One thing I did find interesting at the Dark Quarter is watching other people's reviews, is it seems everyone, myself included, got, like, when you're done with the scenario, it gives you, like, a rating of how well you did. And I can't remember the term used, but it was, like, abysmal. Like, whatever the poorest rating I can get is, I got that. And I saw multiple other content creators who were all saying they got the same thing. So I don't know if there's a way to not get that, but we're all getting an abysmal rating. Didn't detract from the enjoyment of the game, but just interesting to note that. But either way, I like Dark Quarter. I like it without loving it. The same thing with Chronicles of Crime. I like Chronicles of Crime. It's just not my go-to where I want to spend my time. And this felt far more like Dark Quarter felt far more like Chronicles of Crime, which I like, as far less like Destiny's, which I loved. And so right now it's a 3 out of 5, potential to grow to a 3.5 out of 5, but as long as it maintains more of the Chronicles of Crime elements, I don't see it growing past that. It leans heavily into a game that is well loved and has a target audience, and I'm not part of the target audience. The Far Cry video was just a breakdown of what was going on with Far Cry, and then lastly with Sleeping Gods. Sleeping Gods is both the most impressive game I have ever seen designed. That's what I titled the video. It's one of the most impressive designs I've ever seen, but also the mechanics of combat, the mechanics of skill checks lent itself to a tedious enough experience that I felt that there was an amazing game being held back by okay-ish mechanics. And so my experience with it, I'm still not finished the campaign. It's a 20-hour campaign. I'm like 10 plus hours into it. My experience with it is probably more based on where I am. I didn't measure my time, but just based on, I'm like 2/3 of the way through the game, so whatever it is. Either way, my experience with Sleeping Gods was that it is the story is incredibly appealing, but the mechanics slowed me down. I ended up giving it a 3.5 out of 5, but with a caveat that I think that it could or should be a better game, if that makes sense. It's a weird, I gave it I could give a call out to Shelfside. But Shelfside is a channel that they do a public-facing review and a private-facing review. Their own opinion and then a general opinion. And I applied that. I gave it a 4.5 on this game is incredible, and a 3.5 for my own personal experience. And it's something I don't do a lot, something I'm not going to do a lot, but I felt it was appropriate for Sleeping Gods, which I both think is the most impressive game I've ever seen, and also 10 plus hours in, I'm okay with it and not... I love parts of it, and I'm okay with other parts of it. So that's where I am. I'm very middling on it. But that was Sleeping Gods, which brings us to Wednesday. Wednesday was a game-a-day challenge for March. Basically, something I've been doing for a few months now is I'm trying to play a whole lot of unplayed games. Quitting my job will make that easier. But I've been averaging a new game every single day. Either a new game or a new expansion to a game that I already have. Basically, new-to-me stuff. So it's not like playing a game for the first time this year. It's playing a game for the first time ever. And I've been trying to play through a lot of my unplayed games. And this was just, going through March's batch of games. All the stuff I've gone through in March. All the new games. Brief notes on my experience experience with them. A minute per game, just going over high-level overview of what's going on there. Then on Thursday we had Last Year in Review, or Where Are They Now? I always go back and forth on the titles. Basically covering my reviews from last March and how they've held up, any changes, adjustments, opinions. Am I playing them more or less? Did they leave my collection? Things like that. Going over all of that. There may have been an unboxing later on Wednesday. I don't know. Later on Thursday. I don't know. Specifically, Burncycle. It's in shrink right now. I might unbox this. I haven't decided yet. Again, you're watching this while this is in shrink, but you may have already watched the unboxing. It's just wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey stuff. I don't know if there'll be an unboxing on Thursday or not. There may or may not be. We'll see. Then on Friday. Friday was what we backed in March. My wife and I, Rena and I, going through the games I backed in March. Very, very light month. I've been more restrictive in my backing recently. I'm sure that will change. It depends on the month, but for March at least, I was fairly restrictive. Lots of campaigns I was interested in, and only a handful that I actually spent money on. So that's a good month, all things considered. And then from there we move into the videos. Well, today we have a few things going on. We have a review from Marvel Legendary from Upper Deck Games, just covering Marvel Legendary and a few expansions. And then we have Glass Road, a review for Glass Road, not the Capstone Games edition, which is the new reprint they have, but rather I have the Z-Man edition. But I just felt that with Capstone putting out a new version of it, same game, just reprinting it, I felt it was worth putting a review out there because it's a great game that I've been meaning to review for a while, and so I did. Which brings us to the stuff next week, which is, like I said already, there'll be a review for Anastasia going up next week. There'll be a few other things as well. There'll be a 2-back and not to back, some other reviews and content. There will be a full video on monetization on the channel, including talking about how much I make from YouTube, how much I need to spend, all those things. It's going to be a fairly personal video. These things are messy and complicated to talk about, but I think it's worth talking about. Maybe. We'll see. Or it's a horrific mistake. We'll find out. But that is going to come up this week, and so we'll see what happens there. And then lastly, the games on the table. Games on the table, we have just the stuff I want to play this week. We'll see what happens. We have Juicy Fruits from Capstone Games. Speaking of which, I want to dive into this one. We have Planet Unknown, which showed up. I definitely want to play this one. I've been waiting for this for like 2 years. We have DC Deck Building. They basically just launched on Kickstarter. Oh my gosh, I forgot to cover that. Okay, unrelated. We have DC Deck Building. This launched on Kickstarter, and They have the 10th anniversary launching, and I want to dive into and play this and see whether I should be diving into the full Kickstarter or not. And then finally we have Burncycle, which I definitely want to table. I was actually very optimistic. I saw coverage from Jeremy Howard and One Stop Club Shop, a dual review, and I'm more optimistic on it because I played this when it first was available, and my opinion of it was it's good, and as a prototype it's good, but if this is a final game, I'd rather play Too Many Bones. But I'm curious to see how this holds up because they've done a lot of changes, and I'm curious to see. I'm curious to see what it is. And that is it. This is the week in review, as usual. Not shorter like I thought it would be, but that is what it is. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, have a good one. Alexa, now recording.